AITA for telling my brother's fiancé the truth about his job and ruining their relationship. So, this all started a few months ago when my older brother, Jason, got engaged to his girlfriend, Emily. Emily is amazing. She's kind, smart, and genuinely one of the sweetest people I've ever met. She comes from a well-off family, but she's worked hard to build her own career in finance. Meanwhile, Jason, well, let's just say he's never been the most motivated person. Growing up, Jason always found ways to get out of responsibility. He coasted through high school, barely scraped by in college, and bounced from job to job while living off our parents' money. Eventually, my parents cut him off financially, thinking it would force him to get his life together. Instead, he just got more creative about mooching off people. About 2 years ago, Jason suddenly started talking about his business. He claimed he had started a company that allowed him to work remotely and make great money. At first, I was skeptical because Jason had never shown any entrepreneurial drive. But every time I asked for details, he gave vague answers about investments and networking opportunities. He started dressing nicer, showing off expensive gadgets, and even moved into a fancy apartment. I was still suspicious, but my parents were thrilled. They saw it as proof that Jason had finally turned his life around. When he introduced Emily to the family last year, she was completely smitten with him. And honestly, I think Jason played up his successful businessman persona to impress her. Fast forward to last month, Jason and Emily got engaged. Our whole family was celebrating, and Emily's parents seemed delighted to welcome Jason into their wealthy, successful family. But something still didn't sit right with me, so I did some digging. It turns out Jason's business is nothing more than him running an online scam. He targets older people, convinces them he's some kind of financial advisor, and tricks them into investing their money with him. In reality, he just pockets the cash and disappears. I was horrified. This wasn't just laziness. This was straight-up fraud. I confronted Jason privately, and he brushed it off, saying, "It's not a big deal. These people don't even know what to do with their money. I'm just helping them spend it." I told him he was a scammer and a criminal, but he laughed and told me to mind my own business. I agonized over what to do. I knew if I told Emily, it would break her heart, but I also knew she deserved to know the truth before she married him. So, after a lot of internal debate, I decided to tell her. I met up with Emily and gently explained everything. At first, she didn't believe me. She said Jason would never do something like that. So, I showed her proof, screenshots, bank statements, even messages for victims. She went silent, then broke down crying. She thanked me for telling her and left. That night, all hell broke loose. Jason found out what I had done and went ballistic. He accused me of ruining his life and said I was jealous of his success. My parents were furious with me for sticking my nose where it didn't belong. They said I had humiliated Jason and that Emily probably would have helped him get on the right path if I had just stayed quiet. Emily called off the engagement. She told Jason's parents everything, and now even they're distancing themselves from him. Jason lost his apartment, since he was using stolen money to pay for it, and is now basically couch surfing with friends. Now my whole family is divided. My parents are siding with Jason, saying I betrayed my own brother. But my friends and even a few extended family members think I did the right thing. So, Reddit, AITA for telling Emily the truth and ruining my brother's life. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more awesome videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. Thanks for your support. AITA for refusing to let my brother move back in after he got kicked out of his apartment. I, 33M, own a house that I worked really hard to get. I wasn't born into money. I wasn't handed anything. I just put my head down and worked my way up from having basically nothing. I was in foster care as a teen and had to learn early on how to fend for myself. My younger brother, Jake, 29M, had a different experience. We were separated when we were kids, and he ended up getting adopted at 14 by a nice family who gave him everything I didn't have. I was happy for him, but we didn't grow up together in the traditional sense, so we're not as close as other siblings. Despite that, I've always tried to look out for him in my own way. When he moved to my city for college, I let him crash on my couch for a few months rent-free while he got on his feet. When he struggled to find a job after graduation, I helped him network and even lent him money for his first apartment deposit. I didn't ask for any of it back. Over the years, he's gotten comfortable calling me whenever he has financial problems, and I used to help out, but I started pulling back when I realized he never seemed to help himself. Jake has always been more of a live-in-the-moment guy. He doesn't save money. He blows paychecks on nights out, and when things get tough, he finds someone to bail him out. He's never had to really struggle the way I did, which is why he doesn't seem to appreciate what he has. 3 years ago, Jake begged me to let him move in after he lost his job. He claimed it would only be for a couple of months until he found another one. I hesitated because I knew how he was, but I figured I'd give him a chance. Big mistake. He had no urgency about finding a new job, stayed up all night gaming, and left his stuff all over the place like he was still a teenager. He never cleaned, never contributed to groceries, and conveniently forgot to pay rent every time I brought it up. After nearly a year, I told him he had 2 months to find his own place. He whined about how tough things were, but I stood firm. He moved out, but not before leaving his room a disaster and taking some of my stuff, including an expensive gaming headset I'd let him borrow. I didn't even bother asking for it back. I just wanted him gone. Fast forward to last month. Jake calls me out of the blue, asking if he can stay with me again because he's getting kicked out of his apartment. His words, "It's just until I figure things out." I asked him what happened, and he said his landlord was a D***** who was evicting him unfairly. I pressed him, and it turned out he hadn't paid rent in 3 months because he spent most of his money on a business investment, crypto of course. He had a job, but said his boss sucks and that he was thinking about quitting soon anyway. I told him no, I wasn't going through that again. He immediately started guilt-tripping me, saying I was supposed to be his family and that I abandoned him when we were kids, which wasn't even my choice. He said he'd be homeless if I didn't let him stay. I told him he was a grown adult and needed to take responsibility for himself. He started cursing at me, calling me selfish and cruel, so I hung up. Since then, he's been texting me nonstop, alternating between guilt-tripping and insulting me. He also got some mutual friends involved, and now they're saying I'm heartless for leaving my own brother with nowhere to go. They say family helps family, and that I should just give him another chance. I explained what happened last time, but some of them think I should still help him just this once. I don't think I'm wrong for setting a boundary, but the pressure is getting to me. So AITA? AITA for refusing to let my parents move into my house after they sold theirs without telling me? So this whole mess started about a month ago when my parents made a massive life decision without consulting me, and now they expect me to fix it. For some background, I, 32M, grew up in a very strict traditional household. My parents were always the we-know-best type and never really took my opinion seriously. They weren't outright cruel, but they were controlling. Every major decision in my life, what I studied, where I worked, even who I dated, was met with unsolicited opinions and guilt-tripping if I didn't follow their advice. When I turned 18, I moved out for college and never looked back. I worked my ass off to become financially independent and eventually built a successful career in software development. About 5 years ago, I bought my own house, a modest but comfortable 3-bedroom place in a good neighborhood. It was one of my proudest achievements, and I made sure to set it up exactly how I wanted. My parents, on the other hand, have always been terrible with money. They had decent jobs, but never saved, constantly upgrading to new cars, going on expensive vacations, and acting like money grew on trees. I warned them multiple times about budgeting and planning for retirement, but they brushed me off, saying, "That's not your concern." Well, turns out it is now. Last month, they called me and casually dropped a bombshell. They had sold their house. Just like that. No warning, no discussion. When I asked why, they said they got an amazing offer and figured they could downsize and live off the profit. I asked them where they planned to move, and they hesitated before saying, "Well, we thought we'd stay with you for a little while." I was stunned. I asked how long a little while meant, and they got defensive, saying, "Just until we figure things out." That was a huge red flag. My parents have never been the figure things out type. They just expect things to work out for them. I told them straight up that I wasn't comfortable with them moving in. I like my space, I work from home, and honestly, I knew they would try to control my life the moment they set foot in my house. They were furious. My mom started crying about how a son should take care of his parents, and my dad accused me of being ungrateful. Then I found out the worst part. They hadn't just sold the house, they had burned through almost all the money from the sale. They made some bad investments, splurged on a luxury vacation, and paid off debts they had racked up over the years. They barely had anything left. Now, they were completely dependent on me. They showed up on my doorstep 2 days later with their suitcases, acting like the conversation we had never even happened. I refused to let them in. My mom screamed at me through the door about how she carried me for 9 months and sacrificed everything for me. My dad called me selfish and said I was abandoning them in their time of need. I told them they should have thought about that before selling their house without a backup plan. Now, my extended family is involved. My aunt called me to say I was being heartless. My uncle sent me a long message about family duty, and even my cousins are saying I should at least let them stay temporarily. But I know my parents. If I let them in, they will never leave. They will take over my house, my routines, and my life. I feel guilty, but at the same time, I didn't create this mess. They did. They made reckless financial choices, ignored all warnings, and now they want me to sacrifice my stability to bail them out. AITA for refusing to let my parents move in after they sold their house without telling me. AITA for refusing to help my parents after they drained my college fund. I, 25M, went no contact with my parents 3 years ago after a massive betrayal that I don't think I'll ever be able to forgive. They recently reached out, desperate for help, and now half my family is calling me heartless. Growing up, I was a straight A student. Not because I was naturally brilliant, but because I worked my ass off. My parents always told me that if I worked hard, I'd be able to go to college without worrying about debt. They had a savings account in my name, and every birthday, every Christmas, every time I got money from my grandparents, they'd deposit it there. They always talked about how proud they were that they could provide me with a future they never had. When I was 17, I got accepted into my dream college. It was expensive, but with the money in my college fund and scholarships, it would have been manageable. The summer before I was supposed to start, I sat down with my parents to go over financial aid, and that's when they dropped the bomb on me. The money was gone. All of it. At first, they tried to downplay it, saying things had been tighter than expected the past few years, and they had to dip into the fund a few times. But after pressing them, the truth came out. They had spent nearly every penny, and not on emergencies or necessities. No, they had taken vacations, upgraded their cars, and even put a down payment on a boat. A freaking boat. I remember feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. Years of hard work, of thinking I had a future without crushing debt, gone. I asked them how the hell they could do this to me. Their response? You'll figure it out. We did. They had the audacity to act like I was being ungrateful, saying things like, we gave you a roof over your head for 18 years. You think we owe you more? I was furious. I left that night and moved in with my best friend's family while I tried to figure out what to do. I ended up going to cheaper state school, worked insane hours, and took out loans. I basically killed myself to get through college with as little debt as possible. It wasn't the experience I had dreamed of, but I did it on my own. I went no contact with my parents after that. They never apologized. The few times they tried reaching out, it was never about making amends. It was about defending themselves. My mom even had the nerve to say, you wouldn't have had that money if we hadn't saved it for you in the first place, like that somehow justified stealing it. Fast forward to now. I have a decent job, a small apartment, and I'm still paying off my loans, but I'm stable. Out of nowhere, my mom called me. I didn't pick up, so she left a voicemail saying they really needed to talk. Curious but wary, I called back. My dad answered, and after some small talk, which was weird in itself, he got to the point. They were in trouble. Turns out my dad lost his job last year, and my mom's hours got cut. They had burned through their savings and were behind on their mortgage. If they didn't come up with a significant amount of money soon, they were going to lose the house. Then came the real kicker. My dad sighed and said, we need you to pay our mortgage for a while until we get back on our feet. I almost laughed. I asked if they were serious, and my mom started crying about how family helps family and that they had always supported me. So now it was my turn to support them. I saw red. I asked them, like how you supported me when you stole my college fund? Silence. Then my dad said I was being dramatic and that it wasn't the same thing. I told him he was right. It wasn't the same thing because I had been a kid relying on the adults who were supposed to look out for me. They were grown-ass adults who made their own mess. I told them no. No way in hell was I giving them a dime. My mom kept crying, saying they would be homeless, and my dad got pissed, calling me selfish and ungrateful. I told them they made their choices, and now they could deal with the consequences. Now, other family members are reaching out, saying I'm being cruel. My aunt, who I used to be close with, said she doesn't agree with what they did, but they're still your parents. My uncle said, you know, they wouldn't let you be homeless if the roles were reversed. But I don't believe that. I think if the roles were reversed, they'd tell me to figure it out, just like they did when they ruined my college plans. So, AITA for refusing to help them? AITA for kicking my friend out after he refused to stop borrowing my stuff? I, 26M, have been living in my apartment for 3 years now, and up until recently, I've had a relatively quiet and drama-free life. That changed when my longtime friend, Dave, 27M, needed a place to stay. Dave and I have been friends since college. He's always been a bit of a free spirit, one of those guys who doesn't believe in being tied down and hops from job to job, never staying in one place for too long. He's fun to be around, but has a habit of mooching off people. It was never an issue for me personally because I wasn't the one footing the bill until now. A few months ago, Dave called me up saying he had to move out of his apartment because his landlord was being unreasonable. I later found out he just wasn't paying rent on time, but whatever. He asked if he could crash at my place for a couple weeks while he figured things out. I agreed under one condition. He had to be actively looking for a new place. I wasn't in a position to support him long term, and I made that clear. He promised he'd get back on his feet quickly. Well, weeks turned into months. Dave got comfortable. Too comfortable. At first, it was little things, eating my food without asking, leaving dishes in the sink, taking over my couch like it was his personal lounge. Annoying, but tolerable. But then, he started borrowing my stuff without asking. One day, I went to put on my watch, an expensive one that I bought as a gift to myself after landing a big promotion, only to find it missing. I started freaking out, thinking I lost it, until I saw Dave wearing it like it was his. Dude, what the hell? I asked him. Oh, my bad, he said, completely casual. I just grabbed it on my way out last night. Looked good with my outfit. I told him that wasn't okay, that he needed to ask before taking my things. He brushed it off like I was overreacting. A few days later, my noise-canceling headphones vanished. Guess who had them? Dave. He had taken them to the gym because he forgot his. Again, I told him to stop, and again, he just laughed it off. Then came the final straw. I came home from work one evening and went to grab a beer from the fridge. My six-pack was gone. I turned around and saw Dave sitting on the couch, drinking one. I asked him what happened to the rest, and he shrugged. Oh yeah, I had some people over while you were at work. Hope you don't mind. I was done. I told him that this wasn't working out, and he needed to leave. He looked at me like I had just slapped him. Are you serious, man? He said. Over some beer? I told him it wasn't just about the beer, it was everything. The disrespect, the mooching, the complete lack of boundaries. I reminded him that he said he'd only be here for a couple of weeks, and it had been nearly 3 months. He blew up, calling me uptight and selfish, saying that I wasn't acting like a real friend. He accused me of kicking him out over petty stuff and that I should chill out because what's mine is his. That made me even angrier. What's mine is his. Since when? This was my home, not some communal living space. I told him he had 48 hours to get out. He packed his stuff that night and left in a huff. Now, mutual friends are messaging me, saying I was too harsh, that Dave is struggling. I should have been more understanding. But I don't feel bad. I gave him a place to stay when he needed it, and he disrespected me over and over again. So, AITA? AITA for refusing to help my sister after she got fired for something I warned her about? So, this all started a few months ago when my younger sister, Kelly, 28F, got herself into a mess that she absolutely could have avoided. Now my family is angry at me for not stepping in to save her, even though I warned her multiple times. For some background, Kelly and I, 33M, have always had a complicated relationship. She was the golden child growing up. Our parents spoiled her, excused her mistakes, and always made sure she had a safety net. Meanwhile, I had to figure things out on my own. I moved out at 18, put myself through college, and worked my way up in the tech industry. Kelly, on the other hand, bounced from one job to another, always quitting or getting fired, yet somehow always had my parents there to bail her out. Last year, Kelly finally landed what she called her dream job at a well-known company. It was an administrative position, nothing too high level, but it paid well and had great benefits. She bragged about it constantly, talking about how she had finally made it and how she was doing so much better than I had at her age. I was genuinely happy for her, until she started making some really stupid choices. Kelly has always been obsessed with social media. She's the type to post every detail of her life, what she eats, where she goes, what she's thinking. But it wasn't just personal stuff. She also started posting about her job, making TikToks and Instagram stories from her office, sometimes even while sitting at her desk. At first, it was harmless stuff like Monday vibes and coffee break necessities. But then she started crossing the line. She began making videos complaining about her coworkers, mocking her bosses, and even joking about how little work she actually did. She made sarcastic comments about clients, ranted about policies she thought were stupid, and worst of all, filmed herself doing things she shouldn't have been doing, like playing games on her phone when she was supposed to be working. I told her multiple times, "Kelly, this is a bad idea. Companies check social media. If your boss sees this, you could get fired." She laughed it off and called me paranoid. "Everyone does it," she said. "No one cares." Well, someone did care. 3 months ago, she got called into HR and was immediately fired. Apparently, someone had reported her videos, and her company didn't take it lightly. Some of her content violated company policy, and a few of her TikToks had even included confidential information without her realizing it. She was escorted out of the building the same day. She called me crying, completely devastated. She kept saying it wasn't fair, that other people do worse, and that she didn't mean any harm. She expected me to take her side. But honestly, I told her the truth. I said, "Kelly, I warned you. You did this to yourself." She flipped out, calling me unsupportive and cruel. She said she needed help. She had bills to pay, rent due, and no savings, of course. She asked if she could borrow money or crash at my place for a while. I refused. I told her she needed to take responsibility for her own actions for once. She ran to our parents, who of course took her side. They started calling me heartless, saying, "She's your sister. You should help her." I reminded them that I had warned her, that she had ignored me, and that she needed to learn a lesson. They didn't want to hear it. They said I was abandoning her in her time of need. Now Kelly is couch surfing with a friend, struggling to find a new job, and still blaming everyone but herself. Meanwhile, my parents have been giving me the cold shoulder, saying I should be the bigger person and help her out financially. I refuse. AITA for standing my ground and not helping her after she got herself fired. AITA for refusing to give my neighbor's son his emotional support dog back. So I, 34M, have a dog named Max. Max is a golden retriever I adopted 3 years ago from a rescue shelter. He had been neglected by his previous owner, so he was extremely anxious and skittish when I first got him. It took months of training, patience, and love to get him comfortable and trusting again. Now he's my best friend. I work remotely, so we spend almost every day together. I live in a suburban neighborhood where most people know each other but aren't exactly close. One of my neighbors, a woman named Lisa, late 40s, has a teenage son named Tyler, 17. Tyler has always seemed like a good kid, quiet, polite, but very withdrawn. Lisa has mentioned before that he struggles with anxiety and depression, and I always sympathized, though we never talked much beyond casual small talk. A few months ago, Tyler started coming around more whenever I walked Max. He'd ask to pet him, sometimes even sit on the sidewalk with him for a while. I didn't mind at all. I know how therapeutic dogs can be, and Max loves attention. It became a routine. Whenever I'd be out with Max, Tyler would come over, spend some time with him, and just seem calmer. It was nice to see, and I thought maybe it was helping him. Then, about a month ago, Lisa knocked on my door with a strange request. She asked if Max could start staying over at their house sometimes, just for a few nights a week, because Tyler had grown so attached to him. She explained that he'd been struggling more lately, and that Max was the only thing that seemed to make him happy. I felt bad for the kid, but I told her no, Max is my dog, and I wasn't comfortable with that. She seemed disappointed, but didn't push it. Then, last week, Max disappeared from my backyard. I was frantic. I searched the entire neighborhood, called every shelter, and even posted about it online. After 2 days of searching, I finally got a tip from another neighbor. She had seen Max in Lisa's backyard. I went over immediately, knocked on the door, and when Lisa answered, I could hear Max barking inside. I demanded she give him back, but she got defensive, saying Tyler needed him more than I did. She argued that Max had become his emotional support animal, and that she had been planning to talk to me about making it official. I was furious. I told her I didn't care what she had planned. She had stolen my dog. Tyler came downstairs when he heard the argument and started crying, begging me to let him keep Max. He said Max made him feel safe, that he was the only thing that made him happy, and that I was cruel for taking him away. Lisa backed him up, saying I was being heartless and selfish. I told them that if they really thought they needed a support animal, they should adopt their own dog instead of stealing mine. I took Max and left, but now the entire neighborhood is divided. Some people think Lisa was way out of line and that she had no right to take my dog. Others, especially some of the older neighbors, think I should have let Tyler keep him because he's just a boy who needed comfort. Lisa has been telling everyone that I ripped away her son's only source of happiness, and that I should have been more compassionate. Now I feel guilty. I don't doubt that Max helped Tyler, and I genuinely feel bad for the kid. But at the end of the day, Max is my dog. I rescued him, trained him, cared for him, and he's my responsibility. So, AITA for refusing to let them keep Max? AITA for refusing to help my coworker after she tried to get me fired? I, 31M, work as a software developer at a mid-sized tech company. I've been here for 5 years, and while I wouldn't say I'm best friends with my coworkers, I get along with most of them just fine. I do my job, keep to myself, and try to stay out of office drama. That was until Lisa, 29F, got hired last year. Lisa came in with a lot of confidence, maybe too much. She had experience, but she acted like she was the smartest person in the room. She constantly made little comments about how outdated our code was, how she could revolutionize our workflows, and how we were all stuck in the past. Fine, whatever. I ignored it. But then she started stepping on toes. She'd dismiss ideas in meetings, rewrite other people's code without telling them, and act like she was the boss even though she was at the same level as the rest of us. She especially had a problem with me. I don't know why, but from day one, she acted like I was some kind of roadblock to her genius. She'd make passive-aggressive comments about my work, always find reasons to criticize my projects, and even told a few of our coworkers that I was slowing the team down. Again, I ignored it. I'm not the type to get into workplace fights. Then a few months ago, Lisa escalated things. I was working on a big project, one that was pretty critical for our department. Lisa wasn't part of it, but one day I noticed that some of my code had been changed. I looked into it and realized Lisa had gone in and altered things without telling me. And she messed it up badly. I confronted her, and she just shrugged. I was optimizing it, she said, like she did me a favor. When I pointed out that her optimizations had broken key functions, she rolled her eyes and said I was being defensive. I told our manager, who sided with me and told Lisa to stay out of projects she wasn't assigned to. She was pissed. A week later, I got called into HR. Apparently, Lisa had filed a complaint against me. She claimed I was creating a hostile work environment, that I was refusing to collaborate with her, and that I was undermining her in meetings. I was floored. The only interactions I had with her were either ignoring her nonsense or fixing the problem she caused. Luckily, my manager had my back. He told HR that Lisa was the one causing issues, and after interviewing other coworkers, they dropped the complaint. Lisa got a formal warning, and she avoided me after that. Now, here's where things get interesting. A few weeks ago, layoffs hit our company. Lisa wasn't fired, but she was moved to a different team. Unfortunately for her, the new team works with a different programming language, one she's not very familiar with. So last week, she came to me. At first, she made small talk, which was weird because she had barely spoken to me since the HR stunt. Then she got to the point. She needed help learning the new language and wanted me to teach her since I had experience with it. I just stared at her. She, the same person who tried to get me fired, now wanted my help? I told her no, politely but firmly. I said I had my own work to focus on and that she'd have to figure it out herself. She tried to push, saying that we're all on the same team at the end of the day and that I should let the past go. I told her she should have thought about that before trying to sabotage me. Now, some coworkers are saying I'm being petty. They think I should be the bigger person and help her out, especially since she's struggling. But I don't see why I should go out of my way for someone who went out of her way to hurt me. AITA? AITA for refusing to babysit my sister's kid after how she treated me growing up? I, 28M, have an older sister, Emily, 34F. We grew up in the same house, but had very different childhoods. Emily was always the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. Meanwhile, I was treated like an afterthought, expected to cater to her, give up things for her, and let her have her way just because she was older. It started small. If we both wanted the last slice of pizza, my parents would say, "Come on, let your sister have it." If we both had plans, but only one of us could go, guess who had to stay home? Me. If she got in trouble, I was somehow blamed because you should have been watching out for her. But as we got older, it got worse. When I was 12 and she was 18, she had a habit of borrowing my stuff, my video games, my clothes, even my bike, and either breaking them or losing them. When I complained, my parents would tell me to stop being selfish. When I saved up my allowance for months to buy a new skateboard, Emily took it without asking and left it at a friend's house, where it got stolen. She barely even apologized, and my parents told me to move on. The worst was when I turned 16 and got my first car, a used but decent sedan I paid for with my own savings. Emily, who had wrecked 2 cars by that point, begged to borrow it just for a few days while hers was in the shop. I refused. My parents pressured me, saying family shares, but I stood my ground. That night, my dad took my keys while I was asleep and gave them to Emily. She crashed my car into a pole 2 days later. And guess who had to pay for the repairs? Me. My parents refused to hold her responsible, saying she didn't mean to. It was an accident, and you can't just let your sister struggle. I was beyond done. The day I turned 18, I moved out and went low contact. Fast forward to now. Emily is married with a 5-year-old son, Mason. She and her husband are struggling financially, and she recently got a new job that requires odd hours. My parents, of course, volunteered me to babysit for free. They didn't ask me. They volunteered me. Emily called and said, "Hey, so Mom and Dad said you'd be happy to watch Mason 3 days a week while I work nights. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it." I told her I never agreed to that. She got annoyed and said, "Come on, it's just a few days a week. You don't even have kids, so it's not like you're busy." I told her I work full-time and that my free time is mine. She started guilt-tripping me, saying she really needed help, and Mason loves his uncle. When I still refused, she snapped. She went on a rant about how family supports each other, how she would do the same for me, which is a huge lie, and how I was being cold-hearted over childhood grudges. She even threw in, "I was just a kid back then. You can't still be mad about stupid stuff from years ago." I told her that her being a kid didn't justify how she treated me, and more importantly, our parents enabled it. I owe her nothing. She called me a selfish jerk and hung up. Now my parents are blowing up my phone, telling me I'm punishing Emily for things that happened so long ago and that I'm being spiteful and immature. They say Mason is innocent in all this, and I should step up as an uncle. I feel bad for my nephew, but I don't think it's my job to fix Emily's problems. AITA? AITA for refusing to pay my friend back after he helped me without asking. So I, 31M, recently had a huge falling out with my longtime friend Chris, 32M, over something that I feel wasn't my fault, but now almost everyone in our friend group is saying I'm in the wrong. For context, I bought a fixer-upper house last year. It's an old but solid home that needed a lot of work, new floors, some drywall repairs, and a full kitchen remodel. I've been tackling the renovations bit by bit, mostly doing what I can myself and hiring professionals for the stuff I don't trust myself with. I've been open about this with my friends, and they've all seen the progress I've made. Chris, in particular, has always been weirdly opinionated about my house. He's a handyman by trade, and while he's good at what he does, he has a bad habit of pushing his ideas onto other people. He'll insist that a project needs to be done his way or not at all, even when it's not his business. Because of this, I made it clear early on that while I appreciated advice, I wasn't looking for free labor or unsolicited fixes. 2 months ago, I went on a week-long work trip. When I got back, I walked into my house and immediately knew something was off. My kitchen, which I had been slowly working on, was completely different. The unfinished cabinets I had installed were ripped out and replaced with different ones. The new flooring I had just put in had been torn up and redone. My light fixtures were swapped out, and even my sink had been moved. I was livid. I called Chris, and he proudly told me that he had surprised me by finishing my kitchen while I was gone. He said he couldn't stand watching me do it wrong anymore and decided to take matters into his own hands. He and a couple of his buddies came in, ripped out what I had done, and rebuilt everything properly. The thing is, I hated what he did. The cabinets were the wrong style, the flooring didn't match the rest of the house, and the sink was now in a completely impractical spot. On top of that, some of the materials I had already paid for were gone, probably thrown out. When I asked how he even got inside, he admitted that he had made a copy of my spare key last year when I let him borrow it to bring something inside while I was at work. He never told me about it. I told him he had no right to do this, that he destroyed work I had paid for and wanted, and that he basically trespassed. He got defensive, saying I was being ungrateful because he had saved me a ton of money by doing it himself. I told him I never asked for this, I didn't like what he did, and that he owed me for the damages. That's when he dropped the real bombshell. He expected me to pay him for his work. He sent me an invoice for the labor and materials, totaling over $8,000. I laughed in his face and told him I wasn't paying him a dime. He argued that he had done me a favor and that I owed him because it was way cheaper than if I had hired a contractor. I told him that if anything, he owed me for demolishing my kitchen without permission. Now, our entire friend group is split. Some say Chris was way out of line and that I shouldn't have to pay for something I never asked for. But others say I should at least cover the materials because he was just trying to help and I'm being unfair by making him eat the cost. Chris, meanwhile, is furious and saying I'm taking advantage of him. I'm already looking into legal options, but the guilt tripping from mutual friends is getting to me. Was I really that out of line for refusing to pay? AITA for refusing to let my parents move in with me after they sold our childhood home? I, 32M, have been relatively low contact with my parents for the past 5 years. Not because of some huge dramatic falling out, but because they've always had a pattern of making selfish decisions and expecting me to clean up the mess. The latest situation, however, has made me seriously consider going no contact. Growing up, my parents weren't outright abusive, but they were incredibly irresponsible with money. They made decent salaries but spent like they were millionaires, fancy cars, expensive vacations, constant home renovations that they never finished. Meanwhile, they never saved a dime for emergencies or retirement, and anytime something went wrong, they relied on family to bail them out. They also never prioritized me or my future. When I was in high school, I worked part-time to save for college. At one point, I had a little over $3,000 saved. One day, I went to check my account, and all of it was gone. Turns out, my parents had taken it to cover one of their emergencies, a luxury cruise they had already paid for, but forgot to budget for spending money. When I confronted them, they brushed it off, saying, "We'll pay you back when we can." Spoiler alert, they never did. I had to take out loans for college and work full-time to support myself. Meanwhile, my parents kept living like they had unlimited money. I stopped asking for anything from them and started keeping my distance. Fast forward to 5 years ago. They called me excited, saying they were selling our childhood home and moving to a luxury condo in a resort-style community. I asked if they were sure that was a good idea since they were in their late 50s with no retirement savings. They waved off my concerns, saying, "We deserve to enjoy life now." I asked what they planned to do when they got older and needed more stability. Their response? "That's what family is for." I knew right then that family meant me. Sure enough, last month I got a call from my mom. She sounded unusually sweet, which immediately put me on guard. After some small talk, she dropped the bomb. They had run out of money. The luxury condo turned out to have insane HOA fees, and their spending habits didn't change. Now, they couldn't afford their mortgage, and they were going to lose the place. Then she hit me with, "So, we'll be moving in with you for a little while. Not can we stay with you? Not would it be possible to work something out? Just a statement, like it was already decided." I immediately said, "No, that's not going to happen." My mom was stunned. She asked what I meant, and I told her that I wasn't in a position to take them in. Even if I was, I wouldn't because they had years to plan for this and chose not to. She started crying, saying they didn't expect this to happen, which was a lie because I literally warned them 5 years ago. My dad got on the phone, angry, saying, "We raised you, we gave you everything, and now you're just abandoning us." I laughed and said, "Everything? You stole my college savings. You made me struggle while you lived like royalty. You ignored every warning, and now it's my problem." He started yelling about how I was ungrateful and selfish. I hung up. Since then, I've been getting calls from relatives telling me I can't just let my parents be homeless. My aunt said, "They're your parents. They made mistakes, but you only get one set." I told her, "Yeah," and they only had one son, and they treated him like a backup plan instead of a priority. Now half my family is calling me cruel, while the other half is staying out of it. I feel bad that they're in this situation, but I also feel like it's not my fault, and I shouldn't have to upend my life because of their choices. AITA? AITA for refusing to give my coworker a ride after she kept complaining about my car. I, 29M, work at a mid-sized company, and for the past 6 months, I've been giving a coworker, Lisa, 27F, a ride to and from work. We live in the same apartment complex, and when she found out I drove past her building every morning, she asked if she could carpool with me. I didn't mind at first. I'm not a huge fan of small talk, but it was on my way, and I figured it wouldn't be a big deal. For the first few weeks, everything was fine. She was polite, usually on time, and chipped in a little for gas every now and then, even though I never asked for it. But after about a month, she started making little comments about my car. For context, I drive a 2013 Honda Civic. It's not fancy, but it's reliable, clean, and gets me where I need to go. Lisa, however, started acting like riding in my car was some kind of hardship. She complained that the seats weren't comfortable enough, that the air conditioning wasn't strong like in newer cars, and that my music choices were weird. I mostly listen to instrumental jazz or podcasts on the way to work, nothing extreme. At first, I brushed it off, but she kept escalating. One day, she sighed loudly and said, "I wish I could just Uber every day, but it's so expensive." Another time, she joked, "I should start charging you for my company since I have to suffer in this old car." Then she started making passive-aggressive requests. She asked if I could maybe pick a better route because she didn't like sitting in traffic, as if I control the roads. She asked if I could stop at Starbucks for her in the mornings, despite me already waking up earlier than I needed to. She even asked if I could consider upgrading my car since I clearly had a good job. The final straw came last week. We were driving home when she got a phone call from a friend. She put it on speaker, and I overheard her roasting my car in real time. She was laughing about how tragic it was that she had to squeeze into this ancient Honda every day like it's 2010. She joked that she should start a GoFundMe so I could afford a car that wasn't basically a relic. I didn't say anything at the moment, but I was fuming. When we got to her building, she got out, still giggling about whatever her friend had said, and said, "See you tomorrow," like nothing had happened. That night, I texted her and told her that I would no longer be giving her a ride. I said that if my car was such an embarrassment, she was welcome to find another way to work. She blew up. She said I was overreacting, that she was just joking, and that I was being petty over a harmless conversation. Then she switched tactics and said it was incredibly selfish of me to leave her without a ride when she had come to rely on me. Now, word has gotten around the office, and people are split. Some co-workers think I did the right thing, and that she was ungrateful. But others, including Lisa, are saying that I was too harsh and that I should have just talked to her instead of stranding her. So, AITA for refusing to drive her anymore? AITA for refusing to cover for my coworker, leading to her getting fired? I, 35M, work in a corporate office, and up until recently, I was on pretty good terms with a coworker, Hannah, 29F. We weren't exactly close friends, but we got along well enough. She started at the company about a year ago and was friendly, outgoing, and well-liked. At first, I was happy to help her when she had questions about work, but over time, I started noticing a pattern. She was always asking for favors. It started small. She'd ask if I could review a report for her, saying she just wanted a second pair of eyes. Then she started asking if I could quickly finish things she hadn't had time to complete. It was little things at first, so I didn't think much of it. But after a few months, I realized I was doing a lot of her work. I tried to set boundaries, telling her that I was busy with my own tasks. She would always respond with a big, dramatic sigh and say something like, "Ugh, I guess I'll just have to stay late again," or "I wish I had your time management skills." It was clear she was trying to guilt-trip me. Then I noticed something else. She was always out of the office. She took long lunches, left early, and worked from home more than anyone else on our team. I didn't really care at first, until I realized that her work was still getting done by me. A couple of months ago, my manager, Dan, started asking me why I was handling so much of Hannah's workload. I was honest and said that she often asked for help, but I didn't want to throw her under the bus, so I downplayed it. He told me to focus on my own responsibilities and not let myself get overloaded. So, I finally put my foot down. The next time Hannah asked me to finish something for her, I told her, "Sorry, but I can't. I have too much on my plate." She looked surprised, but didn't argue. Then, over the next few weeks, I saw a huge drop in the quality of her work because she wasn't actually doing most of it. 2 weeks ago, she had a major deadline coming up for a quarterly report that she was responsible for. The night before it was due, she messaged me and said, "Hey, I'm super behind on the report. Could you just clean it up and submit it for me? I'd owe you big time." I responded, "I really can't, sorry. I've got my own deadlines." She sent back a single thumbs-up emoji, and I thought that was the end of it. Well, the next day, she didn't submit the report on time. Our manager was furious because it was an important report that upper management was expecting. Hannah tried to play it off like she had misunderstood the deadline, but Dan wasn't buying it. He started looking more closely at her past work and, to no one's surprise, found out that a lot of her completed tasks had actually been done by other people, mostly me. Long story short, she got fired last week. And now, she and some of my other coworkers are blaming me. She texted me after it happened, saying, "Wow, I hope you're happy. You couldn't just help me out one last time?" I didn't respond, but since then, a few coworkers have made comments like, "You really threw Hannah under the bus," or "It wouldn't have killed you to help her just once." The way I see it, I did help her, over and over again. She just got caught when I finally stopped. But now I'm wondering if I should have handled it differently. AITA for refusing to cover for her that last time, knowing it would probably lead to her getting fired? Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what could be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for refusing to give my brother the family heirloom he always assumed would be his. I, 35M, have an older brother, Jake, 38M. Growing up, Jake was always the golden child in our family. He was the athlete, the one who got all the attention, the one my parents were always bragging about. I was the quieter one, more into books and music, and while my parents never outright ignored me, it was obvious who their favorite was. One of the biggest symbols of favoritism in our family was our grandfather's watch. It was a beautiful vintage Rolex, passed down from my great-grandfather to my grandfather, then to my dad. For as long as I can remember, Jake always assumed he would get it next. He would make comments like, "When I get Grandpa's watch, I'm going to wear it every day," or "That watch is basically mine already." My dad would just smile and say things like, "We'll see," but he never corrected Jake. Here's where things get complicated. While Jake was the golden child, he also had a habit of making bad decisions. He barely passed high school because he was too focused on partying, flunked out of college after a year, and has had a string of failed business ventures, each one funded by my parents. Meanwhile, I worked hard, got a scholarship, built a stable career, and never asked my parents for a dime after I moved out. About 5 years ago, our dad got seriously ill. Before he passed, he sat me down and told me he was leaving me the watch. I was shocked. I asked why, considering Jake had always assumed it was his. My dad sighed and said, "Because you'll take care of it, and because it's time you got something for once." After the funeral, my mom gave me the watch as per my dad's wishes. I didn't flaunt it. I didn't even wear it. I just kept it in a safe place because I knew how much it meant. Jake didn't say anything at the time, but I had a feeling it was because he assumed I was just holding on to it for him. A few months ago, Jake brought it up for the first time. He casually asked when I was going to hand it over. I was confused and told him I wasn't. He laughed, like I was joking, then said, "Come on, we both know Dad meant for me to have it." I told him no, Dad explicitly left it to me. Jake's face completely changed. He went from amused to angry in seconds. He started ranting about how it was tradition for the eldest son to inherit the watch, how it wasn't fair that I got it, how I didn't even appreciate it like he would. I told him I wasn't going to argue. Dad made his decision, and that was that. Jake stormed out, and later that night, I started getting texts from my mom. She said I was being cruel, that Jake was devastated, and that I should just do the right thing and give him the watch since he had always wanted it. I asked her if she was seriously asking me to go against Dad's wishes, and she just said, "Your father isn't here anymore. What matters is keeping the family together." Now, other relatives are chiming in, saying I should just give Jake the watch to keep the peace. But I don't see why I should have to give up something Dad specifically wanted me to have just because Jake always assumed it was his. AITA? AITA for refusing to lend my car to my brother, even though he needed it more. I, 30M, have a younger brother, Jake, 26M, who has always had a knack for making bad decisions and expecting other people to bail him out. Growing up, he was the golden child in our family. Our parents always gave him the benefit of the doubt, while I was expected to be the responsible one. That dynamic carried into adulthood, and honestly, I've been trying to keep my distance from his messes. I have a reliable car. Nothing fancy, just a well-maintained Toyota Camry that I've had for years. I take good care of it because I need it for work. I commute every day, and my job requires me to occasionally drive to different locations for meetings. Public transport isn't an option where I live, and I don't have a backup vehicle. Jake, on the other hand, had a car, but wrecked it about a month ago. He wasn't injured, but the car was totaled. The accident was completely his fault. He was texting while driving and rear-ended someone at a red light. The insurance didn't cover everything because he had a minimum policy, and he was left without a vehicle. For the first few weeks, he was relying on rides from friends and using Uber, but apparently that got expensive. So, last week, he came to me and demanded, not asked, to borrow my car for a little while. I immediately said no. I told him I need my car for work and that I'm not comfortable lending it to him given his track record. I reminded him that he literally just wrecked his own car by being careless. He rolled his eyes and said, "Come on, man, that was a one-time mistake." I stood firm, and that's when he got really pissed. He started ranting about how I was being selfish, how he needed the car more than I did because he had job interviews to go to, which I later found out was a lie. He's still just playing video games at home all day. He called me a bad brother and said I was acting like a greedy jerk. Then my parents got involved. They called me and guilt-tripped me, saying that family helps family and that I was in a stable position while Jake was struggling. I told them that wasn't my problem. Jake is an adult who made his own bad choices, and I'm not going to risk my own transportation just to make his life easier. They told me I was being cruel and that Jake is going through a hard time. I asked them, if it's so important, why don't you lend him your car? Silence. Turns out, they know Jake is reckless and don't trust him with their vehicle either, but they still expect me to take the risk. Now my whole family is treating me like I'm the villain. My mom keeps saying, "It's just a car, you can replace it," completely ignoring the fact that I can't afford to just buy a new one if Jake wrecks mine. Jake has been posting vague, passive-aggressive messages online about selfish people who don't care about family. and mutual friends are asking me why I'm letting my brother struggle. But I don't think I should have to suffer for his irresponsibility. If he needs a car, he can save up and get a cheap one like I did when I was his age. So, AITA for refusing to lend my car to my brother, even though he needed it more. AITA for refusing to help my cousin after he mocked me for years. I, 33M, have a cousin, Ryan, 34M, who has always looked down on me. Ever since we were kids, he made it clear that he thought I was a loser compared to him. Ryan was the golden boy, good at sports, popular, always had the latest gadgets. Meanwhile, I was the quiet, nerdy kid who liked computers and reading. Ryan never missed a chance to remind me how much cooler he was. At family gatherings, he'd mock me for playing video games instead of going out, tease me for not having a girlfriend in high school, and roll his eyes whenever I talked about my interests. My parents told me to just ignore him because that's how cousins are, but it was exhausting. As we got older, the dynamic didn't change. Ryan went to college on a sports scholarship, partied his way through school, and ended up with a degree he never really used. I, on the other hand, got into programming and built a solid career in tech. Even then, Ryan would make backhanded comments like, "Must be nice sitting in front of a computer all day while the rest of us do real work," or "I don't get how people actually pay you for that nerd stuff." For years, I just let it go. I had my own life, and I didn't need his approval. But then last year, things changed. Ryan made a series of bad financial decisions, investing in some business ventures that went nowhere. He also had a lifestyle he couldn't afford, fancy cars, expensive vacations, always trying to impress people. Then he lost his job, and his savings ran out fast. At Thanksgiving, I overheard him talking to my dad about how hard things had gotten. He had credit card debt, loan payments piling up, and no real backup plan. My dad, being the generous guy he is, suggested that Ryan reach out to me since my field is always hiring. I didn't think much of it until a week later when Ryan called me out of the blue. It was the first time he'd ever contacted me directly for anything. After some awkward small talk, he got to the point. "I was wondering if you could hook me up with a job at your company." I asked if he had any experience in tech, and he laughed. "No, but I'm a fast learner. I figure you can teach me what I need to know." I told him that's not how it works. The jobs at my company require actual skills and experience. He got frustrated and said, "Come on, man, it's just computers. How hard can it be?" That set me off. After years of mocking me, belittling my work, and acting like what I did wasn't real work, now he wanted me to hand him a job? I told him no. I wasn't going to vouch for someone who had zero experience and zero respect for the field. Ryan blew up. He said I was being selfish, that I owed him because we're family, and that I was acting like I was better than him. I told him I wasn't the one who spent years looking down on someone and then expecting a favor. He hung up, and now my aunt and uncle are furious with me. They say I'm being petty and that I should help family when they're in need. My parents are torn. My dad thinks I should just move on and help, while my mom understands why I don't want to. I feel bad that he's struggling, but I also don't think I should have to help someone who never had a shred of respect for me until he needed something. AITA for refusing to let my friend move in with me after she lost her job. I, 28M, have a friend, Jane, 27F, who I've known for about 5 years. She's always been a bit of a free spirit, jumping from one job to the next, never really staying in one place for long. I've always supported her and tried to be understanding about her lifestyle choices, even though I've had a more stable career path myself. A few months ago, Jane lost her job at a tech company. She told me she was laid off, but I later found out that it was because she had been repeatedly late to work and missed several important deadlines. Jane's been struggling to find another job in her field, and while she's looking, she hasn't been successful. She's also been telling me how hard it's been to keep up with her rent and bills since she lost her job. To be honest, I've always been a little worried about her financial situation, but I've never felt it was my place to intervene. Last week, Jane called me out of the blue and told me that she was behind on rent and would likely be evicted soon. She asked if she could move in with me temporarily until she got back on her feet. I was hesitant at first, but after she explained how bad things were, I said I would think about it. I told her I'd let her know by the end of the week. The thing is, I live in a small one-bedroom apartment. It's cozy, but it's not big enough for two people, especially long term. I've been living alone for a while, and I really value my personal space. I don't mind helping friends when they're in need, but I wasn't sure if I could handle having someone living with me 24/7. I also wasn't sure how it would affect my routine, since I work from home most days, and the idea of sharing my space with someone for an indefinite period made me anxious. I spoke to a few of my other friends about it, and most of them said that I should help her out. One of them even pointed out that I could always charge her rent or set some ground rules to make it work. But there's also the fact that Jane isn't great with boundaries, and I could easily see her overstaying her welcome if things didn't work out. After a lot of thinking, I ultimately decided that I couldn't let her move in. I'm just not in a position to have someone live with me right now, especially given how small my apartment is and how important my space is to me. I called Jane and explained my reasons, saying that I would help her in other ways if I could, like offering advice on job hunting or helping with a resume. I told her I could even help her find a place to stay, but I couldn't offer her a room in my apartment. She was upset and called me selfish, saying that I was abandoning her when she needed me the most. She accused me of not being a real friend and said I was prioritizing my comfort over helping her out of a bad situation. I tried to explain that I wasn't doing this out of malice, but it felt like she wasn't really listening to me. She's since been ignoring my messages, and I've been feeling really guilty about the whole situation. Some of my other friends have told me that I did the right thing by setting boundaries, but I can't shake the feeling that I might have let her down. I know she's going through a tough time, and I feel bad for her, but I don't think I should have to sacrifice my own well-being to help her. I've already helped her in other ways, like giving her job leads and offering emotional support, but it just didn't feel right to bring her into my home. AITA for refusing to let my friend move in with me, even though she's in a tough spot? Should I have made more of an effort to help her, or was I justified in saying no? AITA for refusing to attend my brother's wedding because of his toxic behavior towards my fiancée. I, 30M, have a brother, Mike, 32M, who has always been very close to me growing up. We were practically inseparable as kids, and even though we grew apart a bit as we got older, I've always tried to maintain a decent relationship with him. However, over the last few years, Mike's attitude has started to change, and I've started to see a different side of him. Mike started dating Emily, 30F, about 2 years ago, and things seemed to be going well at first. She's a sweet girl, and we all liked her, but I began to notice that Mike was becoming more distant and, honestly, a bit rude, especially towards my fiancée, Rachel, 29F. Rachel and I have been together for 4 years, and we're very happy. She's everything I could ask for, and I love her deeply. But Mike doesn't seem to feel the same way about her. At first, I chalked it up to just some awkwardness between family members, but it soon became clear that it was more than that. Mike started making passive-aggressive comments about Rachel's career, her background, and the way she dressed. It wasn't just random jabs either. There were comments about her job being pointless, her not being good enough for me, and how she didn't fit in with the family. Rachel is a lawyer and has worked incredibly hard to get where she is, and she's incredibly intelligent and down-to-earth. It hurt me to hear these things, and at first I tried to brush it off. I thought it was maybe a phase Mike was going through, or just some weird family dynamic that would work itself out. Things started escalating when Mike began to make these comments more frequently, especially in front of Rachel. One time, we were all at a family gathering, and Mike made a joke about how Rachel's fancy lawyer clothes looked like she was trying too hard to impress people. Rachel, being the calm and collected person she is, didn't take the bait. But I could see how uncomfortable she was, and it pissed me off. I confronted Mike about it later that evening, telling him that if he had a problem with Rachel, he needed to keep it to himself. Mike shrugged it off and told me I was overreacting. This pattern continued, and I started to notice that Mike was being more openly hostile towards Rachel, even when it wasn't just the two of them. During group gatherings, Mike would tell stories that involved making fun of Rachel or belittling her accomplishments. One time, we were all having dinner, and Mike started talking about how Rachel had to fight to keep her job, as if she wasn't capable of doing it. I stepped in and told him to stop, but Mike just smirked and said, "Well, I didn't mean it like that, but whatever." Rachel got up and walked away from the table, and it was clear she was hurt, even though she didn't say anything. Eventually, things got so bad that Rachel started to avoid family events altogether because she didn't want to deal with the constant jabs from Mike. I couldn't blame her, and it made me resent Mike even more. I spoke to my parents about it, hoping they would talk to Mike and help him see reason, but all they did was downplay the situation. They kept saying things like, "Mike's just like that," or "He's joking, don't take it so seriously." It felt like no one was taking Rachel's feelings seriously, and it made me feel even more isolated. Fast forward to a few weeks ago, when Mike announced that he was getting married to Emily. I was genuinely happy for them, but when the wedding invitations went out, things took a turn. Mike's invitation was clear. I was invited, but Rachel was not. He didn't give a reason why, but it was pretty obvious. Mike had been openly hostile towards her for months, and this felt like the final blow. I couldn't believe it. I'd been patient with him. I tried to defend Rachel every time he insulted her, and now he was excluding her from the most important day of his life. I didn't even know how to process it. I spoke to Rachel about it, and she was understandably upset. She said she didn't want to cause drama, but she also wasn't going to go if Mike couldn't respect her. I agreed with her, and after a lot of thinking, I made the decision not to go to the wedding. I felt like if I went without Rachel, it would be a betrayal to her, and I wasn't about to reward Mike for his toxic behavior. When I told Mike that I wasn't coming to the wedding, he was furious. He accused me of choosing Rachel over family, saying that I was letting a girl control my decisions. He called me weak and said I was letting my fiancé ruin my relationship with him. I told him I wasn't going to support him in marrying someone who couldn't even respect my relationship or my fiancé. Mike then said that if I didn't come, I would be out of his life for good. Now, my entire family is mad at me. My parents think I'm being overly dramatic and should just go to the wedding to keep the peace. My sister told me I was being a bad brother and that I needed to learn to separate my personal life from family obligations. Some of my friends are telling me I'm doing the right thing, but others say I should just let it go and go to the wedding to avoid a rift. Rachel says she supports whatever I decide, but I can see how hurt she is by the situation. She's always been so understanding, but it still breaks her heart to see how Mike treats her. So, AITA for refusing to attend my brother's wedding because of his toxic behavior toward my fiancé? Should I just suck it up and go to the wedding for the sake of family? Or is standing by Rachel the right thing to do? AITA for refusing to let my sister stay with me after she kicked her fiancé out? I, 30M, have a sister, Emily, 28F, who has always been a bit volatile. She's had a few rough patches in her life, and while I've tried to support her as much as I could, things have always been complicated. Emily has always been dramatic, and we've had our share of conflicts over the years, but she's my sister, so I've always been there for her when she needed me. A few months ago, Emily and her fiancé, Alex, 30M, moved into an apartment together. They'd been dating for a few years, and things seemed to be going well. I never really liked Alex, to be honest, but I kept my opinions to myself. He always seemed distant and a little cold, but Emily was happy, and that's all I wanted for her. A week ago, I got a call from Emily, completely frantic. She was crying and telling me that she'd kicked Alex out of their apartment because she caught him texting another woman. According to her, it wasn't the first time she had caught him in questionable situations, and she was done. She said she needed a place to stay for a while and begged me to let her crash at my place. I live alone in a small but cozy apartment, and while I care about Emily, I've always valued my space. I didn't mind hosting her for a couple of days if it was necessary, but I wasn't sure about the long-term arrangement she was asking for. Still, she was in distress, so I told her I'd think about it. The next day, she showed up at my door with a suitcase in tow. I hadn't even had the chance to fully think it through, but seeing her in person, I knew she needed someone. So, I reluctantly let her stay. I set a boundary right away that I couldn't have her staying for weeks on end, but I promised I'd help her figure things out. At first, things went okay. Emily was upset, but she tried to keep herself busy by searching for new places to stay. The problem started when she began bad-mouthing Alex constantly. Every conversation turned into a rant about how he was a cheater and how she was better off without him. While I understood that she was hurt, the constant negativity started wearing on me. I'm the kind of person who tries to avoid conflict, and I don't enjoy listening to my sister trash talk someone, especially when that someone was her fiancé and they had been in a serious relationship for years. I told her that she needed to take a step back and focus on her healing instead of obsessing over him. But Emily wasn't hearing it. Instead, she started getting more irritable with me. One evening, I came home from work to find that she'd gone through my closet and borrowed some of my clothes without asking. I know this sounds trivial, but it was the way she did it that bothered me. She didn't even ask for permission. She just took what she wanted. I told her that she couldn't do that and that I'd appreciate it if she asked first, to which she responded, "You have so much stuff. It's not a big deal." To her, it wasn't a big deal, but to me, it was an invasion of my space. The tension grew. I felt like she was taking advantage of me, and I started to resent the situation. She wasn't paying rent, wasn't making any effort to contribute around the house, and had basically turned into an emotional wreck. Every time I tried to have a conversation with her about setting boundaries or being more responsible, she'd either shut down or snap at me. I was trying to be supportive, but it felt like my space and peace were being slowly consumed. Then came the breaking point. One night, I came home from a late shift to find Emily in the living room, still in her pajamas, watching TV and eating takeout. It was around 9 p.m., and I was exhausted. I asked her what her plans were for the evening, and she said, "I'm just going to hang out here for a while, I guess. I don't have anywhere else to go." I tried to gently tell her that I really needed her to start looking for a new place to stay. I needed my space, and while I had been happy to help her for a few days, it had been over a week at that point, and I couldn't keep up this arrangement indefinitely. I felt like she was becoming too comfortable, and it was starting to drain me. Emily didn't take that well. She immediately burst into tears and accused me of not caring about her. She said I was treating her like a burden and that if I really loved her, I would let her stay as long as she needed. She claimed that I was being selfish and unkind by wanting her to leave when she had nowhere else to go. She told me I was abandoning her when she needed me most. I was caught off guard by the intensity of her reaction. I tried to stay calm and explain that it wasn't about not loving her. It was about needing boundaries and needing some peace in my life. But she wasn't hearing any of it. The conversation turned into a full-blown argument, and she stormed out of the apartment, saying she'd find somewhere else to go. The next day, I got a message from her saying that I had ruined everything and that she would never forgive me for what I had done. She said I was a horrible brother and that I had no idea what she was going through. I felt terrible, but at the same time, I felt like I had done what was best for both of us. I wanted to be supportive, but I didn't want to lose my own sense of peace in the process. I haven't heard from her since that night, and I'm starting to wonder if I made the right choice. So, AITA for kicking my sister out and refusing to let her stay with me after she broke up with her fiancé. I feel like I was just trying to protect my own mental health, but now I'm questioning whether I should have been more patient with her. AITA for telling my friend I no longer want to be part of his guys' night because he makes offensive jokes. I, 29M, have been friends with Greg, 30M, for about 10 years. We met in college and quickly became close. Over the years, we've maintained a solid friendship, and we've always hung out with a group of other guys. Every month, we all get together for what we call Guys' Night, which usually involves drinking, playing video games, and watching sports. For the most part, it's always been fun, and I've never really had a problem with it, until recently. About 6 months ago, Greg started making more and more jokes that were crossing the line. At first, I thought they were just his usual dark humor. I tried to brush them off. He started making fun of people's appearances, cultural backgrounds, and even poking fun at serious topics like mental health and gender. I know humor is subjective, but a lot of the things Greg was saying made me uncomfortable, and I could see it making others uncomfortable too. He'd throw in a quick, "just kidding," after making the comment, but I knew it wasn't just a joke. It was more of a reflection of his attitude. One night, he made a joke about a recent tragedy in the news. He casually said, "Well, at least it wasn't one of us, right?" Everyone laughed, but I just sat there, feeling sick. I couldn't believe he thought it was okay to make light of something so serious. I tried to laugh along, but it felt hollow. When the night ended, I went home feeling off, and I couldn't stop thinking about how much his humor had changed. I talked to a couple of friends in the group privately about it, and They admitted they'd noticed it too. They didn't like the direction things were going either, but none of us really knew how to confront Greg about it. One of them suggested we just stop attending guys' night, but I wasn't ready to do that. I didn't want to make a bigger deal out of it than it was, but at the same time, I didn't want to sit through more of Greg's jokes. A few weeks later, Greg made another joke, this time about women. He said something about how women are too emotional to handle certain things, and that he didn't want to date someone who couldn't even hold it together when things got tough. This comment was directed at his own ex-girlfriend, and the whole group went silent. Nobody laughed. It felt like Greg was starting to cross some very serious boundaries, and I realized that I couldn't just ignore it anymore. I decided to talk to him privately after the next guy's night. I pulled him aside and told him I was uncomfortable with the jokes he'd been making and that they weren't funny to me anymore. I tried to explain that they weren't just edgy or dark humor. They were harmful, and they were starting to affect the group dynamic. Greg didn't take it well. He immediately got defensive and said, "It's just jokes, man. You're being too sensitive." He went on to say that everyone else was fine with it, so it wasn't a big deal. I told him that just because the rest of the group didn't say anything didn't mean they agreed with him, and that I didn't want to be around that kind of environment anymore. Greg called me soft and told me I was ruining the fun for everyone else. He said if I didn't like it, I could leave, but he wasn't going to change the way he joked around. I didn't argue with him much more after that. I just told him I'd think about it and left. The next guy's night rolled around, and I decided I wasn't going to attend. I couldn't just sit there and pretend everything was fine when I felt so uncomfortable. I texted the group that I wouldn't be coming and let them know why. Most of them understood, but some didn't. One of my friends said, "Come on, it's just Greg being Greg. Don't overthink it." Another friend agreed with me, saying they also didn't like the jokes but didn't want to cause drama. Still, I felt like I was standing alone on this one. A couple of days later, Greg texted me, asking if I was still mad about what happened. He called me dramatic and said that if I couldn't take a joke, maybe I wasn't as tough as he thought. He said that if I wasn't going to be part of the group anymore, he didn't want to hear about it. I told him I wasn't mad, just disappointed that he couldn't see how harmful his words were. Greg didn't respond, and I haven't heard from him since. The rest of the group has been quiet too. Some of them still attend guys' night, but I've stopped going. I've had a few people reach out to me, saying they miss hanging out, but nobody has directly confronted Greg about his behavior. The whole situation has put a strain on my friendship with Greg, and I feel like I'm the one who's being unreasonable, even though I feel like I made the right call. So, AITA for telling my friend I no longer want to be part of his guys' night because of his offensive jokes? Should I have just let it slide, or is it okay to distance myself from someone who refuses to acknowledge how harmful their humor can be? AITA for refusing to let my friend borrow money after she promised to pay me back and didn't. I, 28F, have been friends with Jessica, 29F, for about 5 years now. We met in college and quickly became close. Over the years, we've had our ups and downs like most friendships, but for the most part, we've always been there for each other. I considered her one of my best friends and trusted her deeply, but now I'm questioning that trust. About 3 months ago, Jessica found herself in a bit of a financial bind. She had just quit her job, saying she was going to focus on starting her own business, but she didn't have enough savings to keep herself afloat while she got things up and running. She came to me asking if I could lend her some money to cover her rent and other basic expenses. I wasn't thrilled about the idea, especially since I wasn't in the most stable financial position myself, but I wanted to be supportive. She promised me that once her business took off, she would pay me back as soon as possible. After a long conversation about boundaries and my comfort level with lending her money, I agreed to help her out, but I made it clear that I couldn't lend her a large amount. I ended up giving her $1,500, which I know isn't a huge sum, but it was still a significant amount for me. I told her I expected to be paid back within a few months, and she agreed. I didn't really have much reason to doubt her at the time, so I didn't think much of it. I had given her the money because she was my friend, and I trusted her to keep her word. The first few weeks after I lent her the money, everything seemed fine. She was updating me about how her business was going, and we'd still talk like normal. However, about a month passed, and I started getting nervous. She hadn't mentioned anything about paying me back, and I wasn't sure how to bring it up without seeming rude or pushy. After a couple of weeks of deliberation, I decided to message her and ask when she'd be able to pay me back. Her response wasn't what I expected. She apologized and said that her business had not been generating as much income as she'd hoped and that she was struggling. She told me that she'd need more time to pay me back, but she'd get to it as soon as possible. I understood her situation, and I didn't want to pressure her. I told her that was fine, but I hoped she'd keep me updated on her progress. Fast forward another month, and I hadn't received any updates from Jessica. I decided to check in again. This time, when I reached out, I didn't get an apology or explanation. Instead, she told me that she had been really busy and that things were starting to look up, but that she couldn't give me a specific timeline on when she'd be able to repay me. She also mentioned that she was struggling with other financial matters, but assured me that she hadn't forgotten about the loan. At this point, I was getting frustrated. I had been patient for months, but it had started to feel like she was avoiding me. I could tell that the business she'd been trying to get off the ground wasn't doing well, but at the same time, I didn't want to be left in the dust with no explanation or timeline. I sent her a message saying that while I understood she was going through a tough time, I needed some concrete information on when I could expect the money back. I also made it clear that I couldn't keep waiting indefinitely. The next day, I received a message from her that completely threw me off. She said that she'd been dealing with some personal issues and needed time to work through things before she could focus on paying me back. She apologized again, but told me that she didn't have an answer for me right now. She even said that she didn't know when her business would be profitable enough for her to pay me back. Now, I'm not a financial expert, but at this point, I realized that this was becoming a pattern. She kept promising me things would get better, but there was never a clear plan or timeline. It felt like she was giving me excuses, and I began to feel like she might not even be trying to pay me back at all. I felt like I was being strung along, and it hurt. I didn't want to ruin the friendship, but at the same time, I felt like I had every right to expect repayment. I decided to take a step back and make a hard decision. I told her that I couldn't continue waiting for her to pay me back indefinitely, and that I needed to know when I could expect at least a partial payment. I reminded her that I'd been understanding and patient for months, but it wasn't fair to me anymore. I told her that if she couldn't come up with a plan or offer me a concrete date, I would have to reconsider our friendship. She didn't respond immediately, but when she did, it was a long message full of apologies. She admitted that she hadn't been as transparent with me as she should have been, and she said she was deeply sorry for causing me stress. She promised that she would pay me back once her business took off, but she didn't provide a timeline or any concrete actions. She said that she didn't want to lose me as a friend, but that she needed more time. She also mentioned that she was struggling mentally and emotionally, and that she couldn't focus on repaying me right now. At this point, I was done. I told her that while I cared about her and wanted to support her, I couldn't keep putting my own financial situation at risk by trusting someone who had repeatedly failed to meet her commitments. I told her that I wasn't going to continue the friendship unless she could provide me with a clear repayment plan. I didn't want to be part of a relationship where I was constantly giving without receiving anything in return. She got upset and told me that I was being unreasonable and that I was giving up on her when she needed me most. She said I was selfish for putting my finances before our friendship and that I was taking advantage of her mental health struggles by making this about money. That hit me hard. I felt guilty, but at the same time, I felt like I had done everything I could to be supportive. I had listened to her, been patient, and given her the benefit of the doubt, but it felt like my kindness was being taken advantage of. Now, I'm left wondering if I made the right decision. I know I was right to stand up for myself and demand repayment, but I can't shake the feeling that maybe I could have handled it better. Was I too harsh? AITA for refusing to let her borrow more money and demanding repayment after she promised she would pay me back? AITA for refusing to let my sister's friend stay at my house after she made inappropriate comments about my parenting? I, 34M, have a sister, Amanda, 30F, who has 2 kids, a 7-year-old son and a 5-year-old daughter. We don't see each other much because we live in different cities, but we're close enough that we keep in touch regularly. I'm married to Laura, 33F, and we have a 3-year-old son together. We live in a pretty small house, but it's cozy, and we make it work. Amanda knows that space is tight, but when she reached out to me a few weeks ago and asked if her friend, Sarah, 32F, could stay with us for a couple of days, I hesitated. Sarah is someone I've met a few times at family gatherings, and I don't really know her well. From what I've seen, she's always been friendly enough, but a little blunt and opinionated, which made me wary about having her stay at our place for an extended period. Amanda assured me that it would only be for 2 nights, and they would both be coming through the area for a quick visit. She said Sarah was going through a rough patch in her personal life and needed a place to crash for a bit. Now, I'm not the type of person who usually says no to family, especially when they ask for help, so I agreed. I figured it would be a short stay and that everything would be fine. I gave her a heads up about the space situation. We have a pull-out couch in the living room, but she said it was no problem. When they arrived, everything seemed okay at first. Amanda was her usual self, and Sarah was polite, but it didn't take long for things to get uncomfortable. The first night, after dinner, Sarah sat down with me and Laura and started talking about her life and some of her recent struggles. She seemed to enjoy being the center of attention and started making comments about how people are so judgmental about her decisions. We were all trying to be supportive and empathetic, but then she started talking about how she thought parenting these days is too soft and how she disagreed with a lot of modern parenting methods. At first, I didn't think much of it. People have different opinions, and I'm usually open to hearing them out. But then Sarah started making specific comments about how I parent my son. She said, "You guys really baby him, huh? I mean, he's 3, and you're already making him eat organic food, limiting screen time, and encouraging him to play outside. Don't you think you're overdoing it? Kids need to learn how to deal with the real world, and you can't shield them from everything forever." It caught me off guard. I've always been very careful about the decisions Laura and I make when it comes to our son's health and well-being, and I take great pride in being an involved and thoughtful parent. Her comment felt dismissive and condescending, but I brushed it off, thinking maybe she was just trying to sound more experienced than she was. The next day, Sarah continued with the same theme. We were sitting in the living room, and she started talking about how kids today are so spoiled and parents are too concerned about mental health. She said, "When I was a kid, we didn't have all these parenting books and advice. We turned out fine without all this coddling." Again, I felt uncomfortable, but I didn't want to cause a scene. I just politely told her that every generation has its own approach to parenting and that I believe in being supportive and present for my child. But then Sarah really crossed the line. While Amanda was in the kitchen helping Laura with lunch, Sarah turned to me and said, "I don't know why you and Laura are so worried about your kids' feelings all the time. It's not healthy for a kid to think everything revolves around them. At some point, you have to teach them that the world isn't going to cater to their every whim." She went on to say that I needed to stop coddling my son and let him toughen up. I felt my blood boil. I tried to stay calm, but I couldn't help myself. I told her that I didn't need advice from someone who wasn't even a parent. I explained that it's not about coddling him, it's about raising him in a way that makes him feel loved and supported, and that I wasn't going to let her disrespect me in my own home. Sarah looked surprised by my response, and she mumbled something about not trying to offend and just offering her opinion, but I wasn't having it. That's when I decided enough was enough. I told Amanda that I didn't feel comfortable with Sarah being in my house anymore. I told her that while Sarah was welcome to stay elsewhere, I couldn't tolerate someone coming into my home and making unsolicited, rude comments about how I raised my child. Amanda was shocked and said I was overreacting. She said that Sarah didn't mean any harm and that she was just outspoken. I explained that it wasn't just about the comments. It was about her being disrespectful and making me feel like my parenting choices were invalid. Amanda tried to argue with me, saying that I was making a big deal out of nothing, but I stood firm. I told her that I wasn't comfortable with Sarah staying another night, and that if she didn't want to leave, then I'd have to ask Amanda to leave as well. Amanda was upset, and she said I was being unreasonable and controlling. She said I didn't have the right to dictate who she could or couldn't hang out with, and that I was creating unnecessary tension. Eventually, Amanda agreed to leave with Sarah, but not before giving me a scolding about how I needed to lighten up and that I was too sensitive. After they left, I felt a mixture of relief and guilt. I had stuck to my boundaries, but I felt bad about how the situation escalated. Laura supported my decision, but I still felt like maybe I could have handled it better. Since then, Amanda hasn't spoken to me much, and I feel like there's a strain in our relationship now. I get that she's upset, but I don't feel like I did anything wrong by protecting my family from someone who was being openly disrespectful in my home. I'm trying to make sense of everything and figure out if I overreacted, but at the end of the day, I felt like I had no choice. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister's friend stay at my house after she made inappropriate comments about my parenting? Could I have handled the situation differently? Or did I do the right thing? Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.